So looking at the problem of hip drop and why it's so detrimental to human gait, whether it's walking or running, I want to go back to the example of the armless, legless man and how he is able to walk by using spine and pelvic undulations, which are the foundation of how we really should move. If we didn't have legs and arms, it's been shown that we would still be able to walk. We just wouldn't be able to do it as efficiently. But the impulse to be able to walk and to run should come from our spine and our pelvis moving and sending signal into the legs and arms to amplify that movement. So an example of that is the armless, legless man, who is someone who never had legs and never had arms, but still was able to do something that basically is walking by moving the spine and the pelvis. And how it's being done is that one hip needs to lift off the ground and come forward, and then the other hip needs to lift off the ground and come forward. So it's a process of hip hiking a hip up and moving forward. Given that one hip needs to leave the ground in order to move forward, then one can understand more easily why with hip drop, if the hip is not lifting but instead is actually dropping, so it's actually dropping into the ground or even below the ground, then it would be impossible, if this hip is not going to lift, for me to transfer spinal movement into getting this hip to come forward, because there's no engagement in this hip. If I engage, then I can lift this hip. My spine moves and then my hip moves. But if I'm unengaged, my spine can move all day, but my hip is going to go nowhere. So this spinal movement is not being translated into the hip. Therefore, it's not being translated into the legs. But the body is a wonderful thing. And if the preferred way of doing something isn't available, the body will find another way to do it. In this instance, option B is just use the legs. The legs are pulling the pelvis forward, so it's being done more like this. So the body has adopted a compensatory pattern that a person can carry through their entire life. Athletes can carry this pattern through their entire life and be quite good. The body can still do it, but it's not the most efficient way to move. And also it's not as structurally sound a way to move, because for me to move in this way, my core is by and large unengaged, or is not being engaged in a way that creates stability. And that eventually becomes a problem. Whereas, as you can see, if I intend to lift this hip, then the first thing that happens is that my posture, or my internal core mechanism, which is going to cause that to happen, it stabilizes first. It has to engage and stabilize upward in order to lift that hip. Same thing here, if I'm going to lift this hip, in order for me to do that, I can't do it from a slouched position. I can't lift my hip now. I have to become engaged in a better posture so that I can lift that hip. So everything that we're trying to teach in terms of how to obtain good posture, or whatever we call it, it revolves around internally being able to use the system that was designed to create that foundation around which the rest of the muscles can move. So the legs are great at amplifying the signal that the hips and spine send to it. And this becomes a very efficient way of moving, walking, or running when it's done in that way. It becomes a less stressful way on the body. It becomes less stressful for the legs, because the legs are now not having to generate movement and drag the body along with it, so to speak, but instead movement is happening from the core outward, and so the legs are able to just express movement. Same thing with the arms. So this is one example of why it's important that we adopt a good hip posture pattern when we're going to walk and when we're going to run. You're going to feel better doing it once you know how to do it. And the other thing that's really important is that this internal system is, generally speaking, as far as I've been able to tell over the years, alive and well in everybody. It's just not being used because a different compensatory pattern has been adopted and used for many years, and now that's all you know how to do. So you've lost connection to this internal system. But if we get it jump started, then it's alive and well, and it's able to do its job and make the job of every other muscle in your body a little bit easier.